I'll hit you up. Eric, who else is here? Shoshanda needs to get up. Shoshanda, please take a seat. Who else is here? Maricela? I think Lenora might be in here somewhere. We need you to come forward if you're one of the panelists. Where do you want?
Hey, John. Where you at? Good. I'm going to introduce you to Dustin after this. I said I'm going to introduce you to Dustin after this. He's the one for the disability justice.
Yeah. Oh, cool. All right. So everything's cool. What do you think, John? A couple minutes and we'll start, right? A couple minutes and we'll start.
Yeah. I'll find Maricela.
Outside, you saw her, right?
Is it cool to have this
Has anyone seen Jamal?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. He was.
I can.
Oh, there she is.
I bet I was here. Thank you.
I know. Oh my God. It's a packed house. I haven't seen this many people. I'm tired of this. Right? Oh my God. So Jasmine right here is going to try to hold us accountable for time, okay? Just to keep us all moving because we got to get through everyone, right? So we'll do 3 rounds, like 3 questions. Sound good? Maybe like 6 minutes. We'll keep it 2 per question. That sounds fair. I mean, you know what? If it goes over, it goes over. Right? Okay? We'll try. We'll do the best we can. Yeah, I added it today. So I have to introduce you guys. Okay, guys.
Yeah, you should.
I want to sit next to Sophia.
Yeah, you should. Ellie,
Is Eddie off now? Eddie's gonna have a voice that surrounds
Oh,
this stuff.
I like
think
that.
they decided his voice
Oh, I
was
just
more
wish
important.
Eddie was here. I'm gonna email him.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started with tonight's event. All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you for the wonderful, amazing, engaged scholars who put this event together tonight. And we have some incredible panelists, which I will let our moderator introduce. But before we kick things off, I just wanted to start with just a moment of silence for Joseph Rosenbaum and Anthony Huber. These are names we should know and we should remember rather than the name of their killer. So, okay. My name is John Duda. I am a worker owner here at Red Emma's. How many people are here for the first time? Yay. All right, welcome everybody. We are a worker cooperative, bookstore, restaurant, bar, event space, social center, organizing hub. We've been around, I think 18 years or so. This is our third location. We're about to move into our fourth. So if you're not from Baltimore, the next time you visit, if we're not here, it's because we will be at our new home, which we are buying a building. Wait, no, it gets better. We're buying a building and then we're immediately transferring that building into a community land trust so that we can keep it permanently affordable, decommodified off the speculative market forever. So we'll be here through the end of the year. We'll be closing down sometime early 2022, closed for a couple months, and then reopening in our new, hopefully forever home. So, address, it's there's two buildings that we're joining together, so it's kind of complicated, but it's basically 32nd and Green Mountain. Okay, in Waverly, yes. All right, we have a lot of events, a lot of things coming up. We're going to try and cram a bunch of stuff in here before the end of the year, before we shut down. I won't bother you with all of them, but I do want to mention one, which I think is really exciting and resonates with tonight's event, which is an event called Scholarly Reportage and the End of Extraction. This is an event that's been put together by the great folks at UMBC's Baltimore Field School, and it's going to feature local journalists Lisa Snowden and J. Brian Charles, both of whom are incredible, in conversation with Sarah Alvarez from Detroit's Outlier Media, which is a really innovative sort of text-based media project that's kind of trying to reinvent what journalism is and how it could work. So it'll be, I think, resonates with tonight's event, which is really about challenging how something that we kind of take for granted as a field or a practice can be turned from extraction and exploitation towards something that actually serves communities. So with that, I want to turn it over to Nikki Fabricant, who graciously agreed to step in for Robbie Shulliam tonight as moderator of this amazing panel. And I'll let her tell you all about these incredible folks that we're going to hear from tonight.
Welcome all to Red Emma's. This is our radical bookstore. It is of and for the people of Baltimore. So first, I just want to thank Red Emma's for hosting tonight's event, for being the model across Baltimore, for training folks on how to be a worker-owned, worker-controlled co-op. So the name of the panel, Right to the City. The vision was to talk back to the colonialist, extractivist discipline of anthropology, since the American Anthropological Association has decided to host its conference in Baltimore at the Convention Center, a place many of us who live in this city has never even been to. However, the panel has taken on an important life of its own. Most of the folks on this panel really don't care about anthropology, nor do they care about any one of our disciplines. It's more about academics in general, what they represent when they enter Black and Brown communities to do research or to lead community-based learning projects. In discussions with friends and comrades on this panel, we wanted to speak back to anthropologists and to academics. So let's use this as an opportunity to confront all of our predatory institutions of higher education in the city of Baltimore. We wanted these intellectuals, these activists to be at the table today. These are the folks working daily, boots on the ground, hands in the soil, to create and build a more equitable Baltimore. These are the folks whose intellectual and political praxis are at the forefront of radical new ways of thinking about land ownership, equitable development, shared governance, math literacy, and wealth creation for Black Baltimore. We also thought, why not open this up to a much broader conversation about academics and all the humanities and social sciences? We wanted to turn the lens on Hopkins tonight, the belly of the beast. We wanted Robbie Schiller here. He could not make it. We wanted others from Hopkins. I took on the role of moderating, but we do want to turn the lens on some of our anchor institutions tonight. They have preyed upon and extracted so much wealth from Black and Brown Baltimore. This violence or profiteering off of Black pain creeps into new spaces of the city as the tentacles of Hopkins and many other institutions of higher education wrap themselves and suffocate our communities. There are vibrant conversations happening right now in Baltimore about how to undo this past, what reparations from anchor institutions should and could look like for the damage and harm caused for decades. How to utilize resources from inside our universities to redistribute the wealth across this city, to support Brown and Black movements for liberation and break down the walls or the barriers and bureaucracies of these elite institutions. How to create free schools and build education as brigades in the streets. Education is a means for empowerment and a means to fuel healthy and holistic movements that cut across many of the critical political, economic, and racial divides of our city today. COVID-19 pandemic has exposed our deep racial, economic, environmental, public health inequities of our cities, creating more vulnerability in particular geographic areas. And we know the United States has some of the most severe outcomes of this in the world. To echo radical geographer Ruth Wilson Gilmore, premature death has not been evenly distributed. As a local spoken word artist and leader, working with leaders of a beautiful struggle, Lady Breon, in a new documentary film called Dysplasia. Thank you, Eric and Black Yield, for introducing all of us to this incredible documentary film, Vacants in the Village, argued Black lives should not matter in death. Valuing Black life in the age of Black Lives Matter is to see and recognize and act as if Black people do matter. We want to live freely, to have access to resources, to eat well. We need safe communities, clean and healthy communities. Access to these things that affirm us and allow us to be well. We don't want to beg or make an argument for what we should have. These should be ours, but instead we always have to resist. To value Black life is a literal disruption to the world we live in. So I present to you a group of freedom fighters who have been disrupting the world we live in with the hope of creating beautiful, resilient, strong Black and Brown communities. Members of this panel have pushed back against predatory development, neoliberal educational models, city dumping practices that utilize lands and bodies as repositories for the most toxic materials, and a criminal justice system that renders Black life disposable. These freedom fighters have co-created curriculum, have built schools of political thought, and have taken risks to heal, to fight for, and to defend community, despite attempts of our city to block, to undermine, to displace, and to dissolve their collective efforts. So let me present to you Eric Jackson as our first speaker tonight. a dear friend and comrade. He is the servant director of Black Yield Institute, which is a Pan-African power institution based in Baltimore, serving as a think tank and collective action network that addresses food apartheid, cultivating self-determination through Black land and food sovereignty. Shashonda Campbell, I've known since she was a kid, organizing in South Baltimore against the largest trash to energy incinerator that they stopped a mile from their high school. She's a fierce community organizer from South Baltimore. She's building a land trust and a movement across Baltimore to see land not as a commodity, but having a vision, a broader vision for collective governance and for collective land ownership to provide affordable, environmentally sustainable housing for members of South Baltimore. Eddie Conway, who is virtually with us tonight, you will hear his voice. He's a former Black Panther Party leader, a writer, executive producer of Real News, and co-founder of Tubman House, which is a community-based organization in Sandtown, Winchester, providing food, education, healthcare, and land. They too have been focused on creating and nurturing self-determined and autonomous communities. Delphina Yahuan is a Baltimore-based writer, abolitionist, restorative practice practitioner, born in Liberia. I knew her as a student at Towson who organized Occupy Towson to hold our university accountable for its racist practices. Her work is concerned with the uses of memory for Black folks, how memory is inherited, passed down, and preserved. She is the curator of her online library, The Womanist Reader, and a collective member of the interdisciplinary publishing initiative Press. She has launched an archive called Archive Liberia. You should check her out. Follow her on Twitter. She's incredible. Maricela Gomez. We are thrilled to have her here with us, another dear comrade who's been fighting in this city for a very, very long time. She's the co-founder of Volar, Village of Love and Resistance, and has been organizing against the predatory practices of Hopkins's expansion in Middle East Baltimore. She's done incredible work. I'll never forget when she led us through the community, retelling stories of the social support networks, the incredible exchange systems that once existed before Hopkins came and took land and occupied and turned it into basically a space for residents. So we're happy to have her here. Volar's mission is to co-create a cooperative community in East Baltimore owned by Black and Brown people. And Lenora Knowles, a member of the caretaking council at Volar. She's also a part-time organizer with Volar. She's been doing organizing work in this city for a very long time. So we're also happy to have her here. They're building a cooperative community together through the reclamation of land, healing, reconnecting, and building a base of community power. And last but not least, Jamal Jones. Thank you so much. I know I harassed you to be here today several times. I don't give up. If you haven't figured that out about me, I'm ruthless. We want to hear from you about the Algebra Project. You guys are using math literacy as an organizing tool to guarantee quality public education in an apartheid city where we know that education is completely divided and gutted in parts of the Black Butterfly. And they're inspiring kids from all over to become leaders, to create campaigns to address issues affecting young people, to mobilize and educate those who have resources and influence and impact change. So we're happy to have you, Jamal, here with us and a part of the panel. So with no further ado, let's get shit rolling. All right, let's start with a brief introduction to you and to all of your work, okay? I told some of the folks here, I want you to let it loose tonight. So we're hoping to hear the honest and the brutal truth from you all. So let's start with brief introductions. Who you are, the goals of your organization, and the first question for you all is, what would it look like for academics or organizers to align in shared goals and practices to make Black neighborhoods truly matter across East, West, and South Baltimore is the biggest question.
So we'll start down with Eric. Sorry, Eric.
All right, peace and good evening, everybody. Some of y'all having a good evening. Other people just maybe constipated. But so I am Brother Eric, Serving Director of Black Yield Institute, a organization that operates to we're organizing to shift power dynamics in how people access food, acquire and sustain the resources to control our food environments and food economies. We're doing that through two pathways, or what we call gourds, that are publicly facing and outward facing. They entail addressing food apartheid, which, if there's opportunity, we can talk about that later. We understand that power imbalance is the reason for the food inequities that exist in Baltimore City. And we're clear that food apartheid is an extension of white supremacy. And so with that, what we are hoping to do there are create and incubate movement enterprises that address the direct impacts of food apartheid. And through that, we are stewarding an urban agriculture project and also anchoring the establishment of a member-owned and controlled grocery store in South Baltimore. Thank you. Our second pathway is building movement toward Black land and food sovereignty, and we support that through our three other initiative areas that include action network weaving, connecting Black food and land organizers, farmers, producers, activists, academics, policy persons, and other contributors to align our efforts and build processes to work together and to strengthen our core. In addition to that, we are contributing to knowledge creation and research through several projects and works. Check our website. We have our latest content came out, our 5-year report. Really excited about that. Shares about the work that we've done in our first 5 full years, and then also where we're going. Give more context to what I'm sharing now. And then lastly, we are, and really, really important, our political education work, Sankara Raymer Academy. We are working with people to build a community of praxis and developing leaders, hopefully through the development of collective consciousness and organizing tools to return to whatever communities and organizations we're in, and or take up the mantle and work with Black Yield Institute as well. So that's our frontward facing work to address what we see, but also build and contribute to the world that we want to see as well. So that's the work. And my answer to the original question, I think first, and I often, for the academics in this room who have heard me say this before, you're going to hear me say it about 115 more times before the year is out. That's a couple of days. And that is, one of the things is, one of the ways that academics can align is by following the philosophy of the great philosopher Ludacris. And that would be move blank. Get out the way. Move.
Get out the way.
My mother next to me. I won't use the word. It requires a moving out of the way that looks like first asking questions. What would you like? How could our skills that we've acquired through whatever privileges we got there, and we all have them, so I'm not here to shame any privileges, but how do we utilize the financial, academic, intellectual, and other resources to support where where your organization, where your community wants to go. And I think it also looks like holding space to support to support where we're going by offering up just money so that we do our own thing and come into practice when you're asked. And then I think lastly, what I'd say is, I know you need to publish or perish, but chill. And we'll own the data and the processes. Our work about Black land and food sovereignty is not just about food, but about how we control the narratives and information and help us in the way that we decide that you can be helpful.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Maricela, and I'm sort of happy to be here. I'm kind of scared actually, because I haven't really been in a public space with this many people since COVID, and I see most everybody's wearing a mask except when you're putting some food into your mouth or drinking. So I appreciate if we keep the masks because we're still dealing with COVID, right? And we need to be real about that. So I want to respond to the question, and since my partner in good stuff is here, Lenora from Valar, I know she's going to share about Valar, and because she's here and sharing about Valar, I feel I got a little freedom toward sharing other things besides directly about Valar. So if you allow me, I'll probably do that. And so I want to share about Hopkins, because I heard that in an initial part. And as a great example of what anchor institutions do when they throw their anchor and bury the people in the process of anchoring themselves down, right? So you think about the metaphor of this anchor institution, like really think about it, conjure it up in your mind. And what's needed for that anchor to, I don't know if you've ever thrown an anchor. I haven't, but I've watched people throw anchors, and the anchor needs to hook into something in order to be sturdy and tethered into the ground. And so it's a very telling, I think it's very telling to use this word anchor institutions, because in the process of anchoring themselves, they're really hurting the earth and the people connected to that earth to hold themselves there. So even the languaging around it, I think, is kind of violent and exploitive. And we need to really think about that as well. Now, what are the actions that these anchor institutions do? So who in this room is involved in academia? Don't be shy. Just because we're doing this about you, don't be shy. All right. And who's been to academic institutions at some point in their life? All right. So at some point, and it's all, y'all looked around, right? So at some point, we all have contributed to what the academic institutions have done into communities. Because when you were there, and while you're there, and if you're there in the future, your responsibility is to challenge the institution in how it's causing harm. And if you've never done that, then you're part of the problem. I'm sorry to break it down like that, but I only have, 5 minutes? So it feels really imperative that we just name it. Like, we're a society that's so used to looking outward to blame everything that's happening on everyone else, but what we have done and what we can do differently to change what we're naming as a problem. And so it comes time now, right? Like, what else do we need? COVID's changing the world, y'all. Are you going to change? Are you going to get over it and keep doing the same thing? Exactly. Right? And so we need to interrogate these words that we keep using and labeling. And we need to interrogate ourselves. And we need to interrogate the places we live in and walk in for food and buy gas, and certainly the institution, the academic institution that we're all involved in. And so I had the privilege and the violence of being at Hopkins for quite a number of years, 14 years, right? And in the process of doing that, the first thing I did when I got there was recognize that if an institution's intention and goal is about serving community, why is it that at Johns Hopkins East Baltimore campus, there's a perimeter where all the low-income Black people that live in the community right adjacent don't get to move as freely as the people within the institution of Hopkins if they didn't have a badge on? Like, why is that? So I don't know if you noticed, but initially when higher education was established, the goal was that people would be educated so they could help to change the world and make it a better place. Do you hear me? Help to change the world and make it a better place. That was the intention of higher education. I know we've all forgotten that. See, I got a minute. And that's why I said that earlier about we're part of the solution, but we're also part of the problem, right? So we've lost our way in academia. I'm not in academia anymore, thank God and the Buddha, because I'm so ashamed of what the academic institution is. So I hope we all engage with this real question about not only just easy to throw stones at the big institutions, but people make up those institutions. I can go over there and take every brick by brick down of Johns Hopkins, and the people will rebuild it in the same way, but stronger and better able to anchor and exploit the people that they need to keep themselves wealthy and well. You hear me? It's not just about the institution, it's about the people. And we are part of those people that go through those institutions. And what do you do when you're there? Whether it's 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, what are you doing to change it? I'll pass the mic. Thank you.
Could you restate the question? So, no, I ain't even going front. It's a lot of good, juicy stuff. You can't expect me to remember 13 minutes ago.
What would it look like for academics and organizers to align in shared goals and practices to truly make Black neighborhoods matter?
Damn, you want me to do this in 5 minutes?
I know, I'm sorry.
All right. High level stuff. What up? I'm Jamal Jones, co-executive director, Baltimore Algebra Project, citywide youth organization, youth-run, multi-generational organization. So we got folks around that are in high school, that are in middle school, that are in college, post-college, and everyone is working at a job that is paid $15 an hour or higher, and are being paid to do either tutoring services work or advocacy and organizing work. And that looks like a whole bunch of different stuff. Check us out on YouTube. I ain't gonna burn my 5 minutes on that. Now that we done got past that stuff. Oh yeah, the website www.410ap and Instagram is Baltimore Algebra Project. Just follow us on there and you'll get all the juicy stuff that you're looking for that stuff. This question about what do that look like for stuff to work in unison, that's real hard to answer ever, especially in this time. But I guess if I had to throw out some things, one of them is the point at which university and community are coming into contact about any particular project, right? Like, I'll just tell you, if you got the project and then you bring it to people, you fucking up. Like, that's just that. So part of that is, where does that start and who's at the table when that starts? Second part, how do the resources get split up with that? If it's money allocated, first of all, you're not serious about doing the work if it ain't no resources allocated. I don't care whether we're talking about building a house or building a community, right? So if it's first, it gotta be resources there. Second, if the resources ain't being conversed with community about how that gets split up, if that's a backdoor conversation, you fucking up. The third thing I'm gonna land on with that in terms of like what do that look like for it to look well, creating institutional mechanisms to make sure a community has its leverage and remains there. It ain't supposed to live with a particular administrator. It ain't supposed to live with a person. It ain't supposed to live with a department. Shit, if it's doing any of that, it's gonna die with you too, right? If it's living with you, it dies with you. So if there need to be institutional mechanisms, and that could look like redoing the boards so that community have access on that level with voting rights. That could look like redoing your procurement processes so that community organizations actually get boosted up to the top of those so that they can receive contracts. That looks like instead of just thinking about consulting folks on a particular project or research that can be done on them, how about consulting us on research to be done on your ass? Right, like, because I mean, for real, black people have been treated like in communities of color, Latinx folks, everyone has been treated like goddamn lab rats for a long time. And the question still comes that, like, even the folks who come to the party late come to and say, well, how do we work with you on your problem? And it's like, white supremacy ain't my fucking problem. That's your problem. And I'm going to yield my time.
Oh no!
No, I have to follow that. Hi again. My name's Lenora Knowles, and I'm from Volad, Village 11 Resistance. And I guess our work for me right now, as I'm like, working with folks, I think I like to talk about Volad in terms of two kind of core ideas. One, community control of land and housing. We're trying to take back land, create spaces for Black people to live, to breathe, to play, to just be free, right? Just to be Black people and to have space to build community, to organize. And so we recently, last year, we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of purchasing 2 buildings on East Monument Street, Insert and Monument. And that's a huge thing for Black people to own land, and not just, on an individual basis, but in collectivity, right? So we're not thinking about our individual selves, but what does it mean for a community to own land collectively? And then to use that land for the collective good, as a public good, as a resource. And so one of the buildings is going to be an affordable housing cooperative, and we're really excited to be building that out. And not just a housing cooperative, but an intentional community. So like, how are we led by values, a shared vision, right? And the other building will be a community center, a hub. We'll have like a wellness center, a daycare center. I'm really excited about the organizing school, and my head's really there and my heart's really there with the organizing school. And we're currently in a whole rigmarole trying to get this green space that's just next to the building, and the local political leadership, it's been up and down. The city drags its feet on everything. We're trying to purchase that land to be a green space for the community and by the community. And so from there, we're wanting to expand and to continue to develop housing and land. One of our key kind of strategies is the Community Investment Trust. So you heard people talking about the community land trusts. The Community Investment Trust is a way for folks to become co-owners and co-investors in the space, right? So owning it, investing in it. White people know these practices. You all get taught these things by your families. You might even have, various inheritance and wealth that you kind of have at your disposal. But what does it look like to build collective legacy for Black folks? And so that's some of the work that we're doing in terms of land and housing. And I'm really excited about our organizing school. I heard Eric also, I got to partake in some of the political education that's happening in South Baltimore, and super grateful for that experience. And we're also thinking about, how do we develop our hearts and minds for the long haul? How are we building leaders for the long haul, particularly for folks and among folks and as folks who are most directly impacted by these systems of power, of oppression and power. And so we've been doing PE for over this past year, and it's been really great to do it outside. It's been hot, people are dedicated to, studying history, studying Black radical organizing. And it's been really exciting to see how folks are thinking through big concepts like uneven development, Black folks, right? Folks who are maybe haven't had access or, systematically excluded from institutions of higher ed. So creating our own spaces for developing hearts and minds. I want to out myself. I am a PhD student in women's studies, women, gender, and sexuality studies, and I don't really claim my institution like that. But I raise it because I'm trying to steal shit, And so in the vein of like Moulton and Harney and thinking about, oh, I'm not buying it. I'm not paying for that. No. Or you talking about my tuition? Oh no, I'm not paying for that. No, I couldn't. I'm not going into debt. I refuse to go into debt. But I think that it's important to be thinking about how are we harnessing the resources of these institutions for community, and that work is led by community. You're talking about like how is it that we align shared goals and practices. I think I had some notes, but they all got jumbled. But I think for me, I think scholars and researchers need to stop doing things for clout. I think that there needs to be like a deep recognition for the fact that like people are building whole careers, thank you, Jasmine, political capital, social capital off the stories and bodies of low income, poor Black folks, and that needs to stop. I also think that, again, around like the questions need to come directly from communities, and not the other way around, which I think you were noting, right? Like, oh, I have this great idea that I thought up after I read a book, and now I'm going to take it to these Black people, and then like maybe they'll like say I can, use their stories and their bodies and photo ops and things like that.
May I have a quote, please?
You have a quote?
No, that's what the question is.
Oh. Yes, right. And then I think also just rethinking rigor. Like, how is it that scholars need to rethink rigor and disciplinarity? I think a lot of times people are really stuck in their disciplines and really trying to put this very uncritical understanding of rigor, or think that they're doing rigorous work, but it's actually just like colonial work. It's a colonizing force in the community. And so I think just understanding like that there needs to be, maybe it's an impossibility, right? That we need to really grapple with, in terms of not assuming that there can always be alignment. Maybe we need to undo the university, dismantle it altogether. And so like, maybe it's not even coming from the university as a whole, but thinking about other educational practices and practices for knowledge production that are emerging outside of the university system altogether.
Hi, everyone. Hi. Great to see you all. I am Shashonda Campbell. I work with the South Baltimore Community Land Trust. I started out with the group called Free Your Voice. Free Your Voice was a student-led group out of Benjamin Franklin High School, and that is in Curtis Bay, Brooklyn. If you're from Curtis Bay, Brooklyn, you know we say both because it's split by one street. So, and it was really a movement of students wanting to do something in the community to make a change, right? It was like we always been told students can't do nothing, kids are bad, blah, 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 blah. It's the stigma. And so as students, we wanted to make a change in our community, which our community needed. It needed that. And so we formed this group called Free Your Voice. We found out about the nation's largest incinerator that was going to be built less than a mile away from where we were in that very moment. And we could have folded. We could have just let that happen, right? Just like a lot of things that was developed in our community. But we didn't, right? We went to go talk to communities. We went to go work with many people, right? It was lawyers, it was other people from different universities like Nikki. And, it was a really big thing. And when that incinerator did stop, it showed the community that all this time we thought the power landed in these different things like institutions. We thought it landed in all these big companies that had millions of dollars and we didn't, right? But that showed us in that very moment that the power always lands in the people, and the people built up all of those things, right? And so since then, we started to say, okay, now what does the people want to build? And that is how the South Baltimore Community Land Trust came to be. And the South Baltimore Community Land Trust mission is to build community development without displacement, which we have seen development in our communities, but usually it's not for us. When you see a Starbucks, that means it's time to go. If you see a Dunkin' Donuts, you're cool for a little while. And so for a long time, we we saw the Starbucks and it was getting real close. It's still close right now. So we had to move up. We had to move real quick. And so we started to know we had to get land, right? So we started to say, okay, we know one thing for sure, one thing for certain. We are going to make our community better. And with that comes gentrification to our community, right? Because now it's like, oh, these are waterfront communities. But these communities for over 35 years has been used as dumping grounds, okay? They hold all of where your trash go is burnt in these communities. Or it's landfill in the same community. Or the medical waste stuff is in the same community. And then there is a coal pile in the same community. You get where I'm going with this. And so we know that what we are doing in our movement is to say we're not going to allow those places to stay in our community. And so what we are doing is while we're fighting against those things, we're also fighting for what we want, which is we want development, but we want development that respects our lives, that respects what we want. We want the development to match our communities, right? And for a long time, that hasn't happened because the development wasn't for us. And so now what we have is 10 plots of land. People might say, oh, that's nothing. But to us, it's everything because we started with nothing. And so now we have 10 plots of land. When we say to people, what do you want to see? They say, we want to see a park. The other people say, we want to see homes. Our homes are terrible. Our homes, they have mold in it. They leak, right? Our kids live in them. These homes cost over $1,000, right? For 2 bedrooms. Makes no sense. And the 2 bedrooms aren't even good. And so the Land Trust is making permanently affordable homes, right? And that means for home ownership. It's not only just a rent, because we want to show our communities what people have hidden for us for a long time, which is, guess what? Anybody know? We can own something, right? They've been teaching us to rent for many years. And in our community, most people are renters. And that's okay if you want to be a renter, right? But a lot of people in our community want to experience owning something. They just didn't have that chance in the system and the markets that we have in place. And so there is systems, that are in place. Then those systems have to come down. We cannot keep building in these systems because we have to scale these efforts up. And that means changing the systems that are in place, the systems that oppresses communities of color, the systems that have told us that we don't matter, the system that has said we are disposable at every turn. Those systems have to come down. And those systems are continuing every day, business as usual, while our communities are suffering, okay? And that is why, I'm appreciative. Let me stop. But listen, for real, that is why we are here today. And that's why this matters, because this is not just a project like when universities come to us to ask us to sit on a panel. Oh, EJ panel, come talk about the wonderful work you're doing. It doesn't stop there for us. To us, we got to do after that? We got to go in the community. We got to talk with people. We got to host meetings. We got to get on the ground. We got to make sure the land is right. We got to go build whatever we want in the community. So after your panel, you get to go home. We don't. So this is real. So if you are going to help us and you want to help, you come with your shovel ready to dig in the ground with us. If you want to hold another conversation and know what we need, let us tell you. Don't tell us. Because for a long time, we have been told what we need, and those developments has harmed us. Those developments have created systems of oppression that continues. And so don't tell us what we need. Let us tell you what we need. We know what we need. Stop acting like we're not dumb. For a long time, they have been told that we don't know anything, as if education is a privilege. And to some it is, right? But at the end of the day, when you want to come into these communities that's literally love their communities, that has been exposed to a lot of bad and harmful things, talk with us. Don't come with this top-down approach. We heard that, and we won't trust you. We don't want to sit on your EJ panels for a day. No, we do not. We don't want your budget for $100. That ain't doing nothing. We want a budget for $100,000, okay? And we know some universities got it. We need land. Help us buy land, okay? Help us own what has been taken from us. Help us own what we need to stay in our communities. because people love our communities. Thank you all. I'm sorry. I'm gonna shut up now.
Good. I knew I was good. When I seen that, I said, oh, yeah. Hi everybody. How y'all feeling? Good. My name is Bilfina Yawan. I'm a restorative practices practitioner. I also do transformative justice work, and I'm a circle keeper as well, which means that I hold space. I hold containers for people to be able to come together and be in conversations. I think that we think that communication and gathering, it's easy, but it's not. I think about Fred Moten saying that the task is to learn how to be together, and that we're often attempting to solve issues, but we don't even know how to be together first. In addition to my RP and TJ work, I also am an archivist. A lot of my archival work is around the literature and knowledge production of Black women writers across the diaspora, as well as Liberian history. If you didn't know, Liberia is a sister city to Baltimore. Yes, we are. It did not come out of a good thing. It came out of Maryland essentially colonizing Liberia. And so that is a piece of history that Baltimore, Maryland, and the US still has yet to grapple with. And so there's this understanding that Liberia and Ethiopia are the two African countries that were never colonized, and yet Liberia was colonized by the United States, and Maryland had a hand in that colonialism, right? So you have something to do when you go home tonight. So when thinking about this question, I want to completely transform how we're thinking about this, because I think that when folks begin to think about academia and what it looks like to work with organizers, we're always looking from the perspective of predominantly white institutions or academia from whiteness, right? Because Black studies is a thing. And so when we begin to think about what it looks like for academia to work hand in hand in communities, I'm thinking about Sylvia Winter, No Humans Involved. I'm thinking about June Jordan, Black Studies Bringing Back the Person. I think that if we continue to ignore Black studies and what has come out of it to have these conversations, we continue to move white supremacy and the idea that Black academia has never considered these questions before. We have, and we still do. So what I first want to think about when thinking about what it means in this alignment is I think about Sylvia Winter essentially says the goal of academia should be to completely unravel the white supremacist categorization of what it means to be human, right? And that academia, what it has done is created a hierarchical structure around what is human. And that question of humanness has consequences on everything that we do, down to knowledge production, right? And so you think about anthropology and the work that anthropology has done to completely displace and place Black people as in the category of non-human, right? You think about sociology doing the same thing. That is part of the function of white supremacy, is to place Black, I'm talking specifically from the perspective of Black person, because that is what I am, but to place Black people in the category of non-human, right? And so before we even begin to talk about what it looks like for academics to work side by side with community members, we first have to talk about what it looks like for academics to see Black people as humans. That is the beginning of this conversation, not the tail end, right? And then we think about what is knowledge. Knowledge does not begin and end in institutions. So when I think about academia, there's this idea that all academics are sitting in institutions, and they're not. Political prisoners have been knowledge productions in academic, right? We think about the intellects that exist within Black communities who had no access to schools. We think about freedom schools, right? And what the Black Panther did. And so this idea that when we talk about academia, that we're talking about institutions is white supremacy. Intellectualism does not sit and hold in white institutions. That's not a thing. It still does not exist in Black institutions. HBCUs are not exempt from white supremacy. And so intellectualism can be formed and created and held outside of these buildings. And so when I think about the question of what it looks like for academics and organizers to work together, I'm not even thinking about academics and institutional buildings, because white supremacy is pervasive, and most academics who work within institutions will always betray Black people. It don't matter if you work in the Black Studies department. I have seen it with my own two eyes. The way in which the institution function is to isolate and separate those academics away from people, right? So you spend all day long with your head in the books, right? You think about your publishing papers and so forth. I even think about what it meant to be a student organizer, and where even though we may have had radical professors who wanted to partake, they couldn't because one, their tenureship was at risk, or they didn't want to get fired. And so what you see is the ways in which the institutions directly cut radicalism at its feet, right, within those universities. And so I think for me, I want to think about what it means to build intellect outside of the university, what it means to think about why you hit me for what it means to think about academics not as those people who are trotting around school buildings, but the people outside of it. What it means to tap on people like political prisoners, disabled artists, and so forth as those knowledge producers, because I don't really give a fuck what you're doing in your school buildings. I don't think you're that smart or that intellect. I think about Toni Morrison saying when she started working at Penguin Random House that she was not impressed at all by any of the white men who were there because she knew she was smarter than them. And so I feel the same way. And so this question for me is a bit hard because everyone has been talking from the place of what it looks like to work in collaboration with institutions. And I don't want to work in collaboration with y'all. And so now I want to think about what it looks like to work outside of that. And so, yeah, back to what I say, first, we have to begin by honoring and seeing Black studies as a legitimate study that has been doing this work well before white anthropologists even had the idea, before they even considered us humans, which they still don't, right? And so I say all that to say, part of Black studies work is imagining the unimaginable. And imagining the unimaginable is the work that it takes for us to build community. And that cannot happen in a university setting. So I don't know. Sorry, I ain't had the answer y'all was looking for.
Okay, so I know we have to hear from Eddie, which we want to give him space to be able to chime in. But Bilfina basically articulated what the second question was, what knowledge production outside of these institutions should look like. You all are doing it in your own ways. So we'd love to hear from you about that. But we open it up to Eddie to respond. He's going to come out of the speakers.
Did you call me?
Yeah.
I can't hear.
Yes, we would like you, Eddie, if you want. Have you heard some of the discussion?
I'm not hearing anything.
He's not hearing anything. Okay, well, why don't you introduce yourself and the work that you do? Can you hear that? He can't. We're having some technological. Who has the live stream going? Okay, while we're getting Eddie situated, maybe we can start, or yeah? You want to go back this way?
Hey, Dwayne, I'm not hearing anything now except static. All right.
Cameron's trying to type some questions to him. If he could introduce himself and talk about the work that he's doing currently. And then if he wants to answer the question about organizers, academics, thinking about shared practices of making Black Lives Matter and neighborhoods. They have.
All right, so I'm gonna attempt to speak to the second question around.
Real quick, Eric. Is it possible so that everybody can hear clearly? We can turn the static down.
Former member of the Black Panther Party, former political prisoner. I work in the Gilmore Homes area. We run a project called Tubman House. The reason we started working down there was to give young people a opportunity to have some better life chances and choices. It's like a war zone down there. I'm looking at the corner of Pressbury and Mount Street in particular, where we started organizing. A year after we started organizing, Freddie Gray got killed right there on that corner. 6 years later now, yesterday, a young lady that we have been working with for several years, 13-year-old Meleny, got shot 6 times, died yesterday. So it's with some anger and a heavy heart that I actually come before y'all, because we have been talking about this stuff for decades. We have been looking at this stuff for decades. We have been sitting around tables for decades. We have been creating neo-colonialist leaders. We have been working, talking about the evil institutions and what we need to do about them and how we can fix it. I would suggest that organizers and academics bring their asses down to the community. Go down in the community and start working with people down there. If you think there's a problem down there, and you know it is, it's massive poverty, it's massive unemployment, it's massive drug problems, health problems, etc. Young people down there are suffering from occupation. All they see is constantly disappearing relatives, friends, family members into the prison industrial complex. It traumatizes them. All the other things they see is dead bodies laying all over the place. Go down in the community. The organizers, and I know this panel here has good organizers, and in fact, I've watched the stuff that they've done, so this is not addressed to them, but we have so many talking organizers that want to teach us about what we need to do to take care of the community. We have so many people that are down to tell us how we need to set around, how we need to get the resources, how we need to do this. No, I say go down in the community with the academics, with the organizers, and with the people in the community and find out what their problem is. If you claim there's a food desert down there, then create a food co-op. Organize the people in the community, create a food co-op. Create a situation where they can get the food that they need to get. If you claim that there's homeless people all over the place, sleeping here and there, and don't have any other possibilities, Baltimore City has 17,000 vacant houses. Take 100 of those houses. Academics, organizers, people that are concerned, work with the people in the community, develop those houses, put those homeless people in there. And if the city want to fight about it, then fight about it. We are way past the time that we need to be sitting around having these kind of sessions, and of course we need to have them, but we need to do something besides continue to have them. It's past the time. We're in a critical stage in history right now. We're at a stage in history where we're looking at the face of fascism. And the face of fascism is not just white supremacy. The face of fascism is also Black neocolonialism and neocolonialism of other colors. We have to be aware that we're going into this decade, the 20s, in a very, very dangerous situation. And if we don't organize among the masses, if we keep talking about how to, and part of what we're doing is trying to stop gentrification. If we keep talking about how to get resources, how to do this, we know that Freddie Gray is 10, 20, 30,000 times Freddie Gray unemployed down in our communities. We need to fix that. How do we fix that? We don't fix that by sitting out on the side saying, let's create a car wash project. And we don't create that by sitting on the side saying, we need to do something about the resources that are going to our community so we know how to talk to young people. No, you need to get down there. That's the key to this whole thing, is getting down there. Organizers and academics, you need to get down there. And then you need to take the resources that you have as organizers from your nonprofits and from your grants and your foundations, etc. You need to take the resources you have from your colleges and your universities, and you need to bring them down in the community. And then you need to use them to hire people, either to fix the houses or to create the food co-op or to create freedom schools or to do the things that you need to do to give young people a chance. Because the bottom line in all of this is poverty. And if you don't bring them resources and you don't use them resources, and you can't keep using them resources in a capitalist collective way. You got to use those resources for the people in the community. You got to use those resources to better the conditions of the community, not just the top 10%, or not just the people that the best and the brightest that you target, but the community has to be left with those institutions. You got to build that, and you can't build that without the community. So I think it's important. One of the things somebody, and my wife pulled me up and said, I wouldn't answer any of those questions. And I thought about them and I said, well, okay, I really can't answer those questions, because when you look at it, and somebody said this to me the other day, when you look at it, what you'll find is down in our Gilmore Homes, in the epicenter of what's going on in the prison system here in Maryland, Gilmore Homes. When you look at that, you'll find out that there's more money for the police to protect and serve the people down there than it is for the people to eat and survive and take care of their health. And so how can you as a bodyguard protect me as an individual, and you got more money and more resources and more stuff than I have, and I'm impoverished? That equation don't balance out. Use some of that money to change my conditions, and then I won't need a bodyguard. Then I won't need to fight for resources among ourselves. You know, I it's important to understand that this whole thing's got to be changed, and it's got to be changed in a different way. We can't keep on doing the same thing, sitting around the same table. You got to get out there, because it's kind of late in the day. It's really late in the day, and you're going to wake up in 24 or 25 and find Hitler in an orange toupee, and it's going to be too late.
Hello, hello. In attempting to respond, can everybody hear me? Y'all good? No. Somebody say no? You can't hear? What about now? All right. So, in attempting to answer the question about knowledge production, which I don't know if I fully understand the question, I'll just start with indigenous peoples, and I don't mean just indigenous to this land, but indigenous peoples and specifically African peoples have been producing knowledge since forever. And I think that I make that point because there are many people, maybe not folks in this room, who will either say verbally or think that, research, knowledge production, data collection is white. They're not. They're tools of highly organized people. And they've been utilized, these tools have been utilized for to contribute to the demise and further oppression of Black and Brown and other oppressed peoples. And so I start there and with this recognition that storytelling, knowledge creation, information production, teaching, and the building of communities around, intellectualism is as African as kente cloths and sorghum and so many other things. And so I start there. And I also just lift up a general commentary from a local brother here, organizer and scholar, Brother Davon Love, who have often talked about the ways in which not only white institutions, but the way that whiteness tends to or seeks to delegitimize the ways in which scholarship happens from Black people, unless there is a certain amount of assimilation or capitulation with the ways in which white institutions or frameworks for writing and knowledge production are. And beyond that, fighting against that tendency to delegitimize the topics and the ways in which we write and tell stories, I argue that in the pursuit of sovereignty, liberation, or whatever we call it these days, that a part of our sovereignty has to happen through the production of not only conceptual frameworks, but also theories and ideas that affirm us and our humanity, as we talked about. And borrowing from Dr. Amos Wilson, another Black scholar who wrote a very powerful, many books, but very powerful book called Blueprint for Black Power. He talks about the need to, he talks about the importance of the theory. Many people will argue against the theory, but essentially what he asserts is that in order to be free, one of the most practical things to have is a good theory, is a good point of reference on how we operate. And so we have to look to scholars like Dr. Marimba Ani and Dr. Amos Wilson and Dr. John Henry Clark. And I keep saying doctor, but there are many folks, whether they have degrees or titles or anything, that have produced knowledge outside of the white acceptance, outside of white institutions, that contribute to the pursuit of liberation. And there's so much that people, whether it is documented through writing or through podcasts, through audiobooks, or whatever platforms are in existence, if you are real about contributing to the liberation of African peoples, to shifting academic flows and frameworks, then we got to listen to those who are who have done and or are moving toward liberation. And so there are many scholars, whether we call them that or not, that I believe are contributing to liberatory praxis. And there are many ways to do that. It does not have to, and it should not follow those frameworks that are offered up by academic institutions. Otherwise, we're going to go where the source tells us to go. And I would argue that liberalism ain't going to get us to liberation.
Can you repeat the question?
Knowledge production outside of institutions, kind of thinking about your model of education.
Okay, thank you. So I think of the people I quote the most in my life, as I walk through life and as I do work against racism and oppression, and the people I quote the most are my mother and my grandmother. Neither of them went to college. In fact, my grandma didn't even go to high school. And so to me, that's knowledge production. Because what am I using knowledge for? Am I just interested in writing things so people read it, so they see my name somewhere and just fulfill my ego and build that up? Because that's kind of what we get caught up in, right? All of us, not just the academics and the scholars, but the activists and the organizers as well. So when I think about who guides me, it's these two women who were strong, powerful people in my life. And one of them, thank God, is still alive. And every time there's something that comes up, some little saying comes in my mind. I'll say something and I'm like, oh, wow, like that's what they meant. So to me, knowledge production, it's the word knowledge is what do we do with it? Are we just producing stuff, writing papers, and who reads it? And does it just sit on some shelf, right? And I don't mean, again, just academics. I mean, any of us, because with blogging now, we're all doing that, right? We're all taking our ideas and putting it down. This idea of conceptual learning. And remembering that the concept comes from an experience and then it reinforces itself. So I don't know if you remember, but this is how we learn things. There's an experience and then there's a few of them and then we form a concept like, oh, there's a pattern here. Oh, let's make this thing. And then the experience of someone else might influence it and then maybe we change it. At least if we're open to really understanding what is happening in the world. So in community, it feels, and when I say in community, I mean in any community, but we're talking about this kind of bifurcation of scholar, academic, and community organizer, grassroots. I feel like just in general, how do we put out knowledge that leads to understanding and not just words that fill papers and now screens? Because this is really what it's about. We're just, we just talk. There's a lot of blah, blah, blah going on. And sometimes I find myself blah, 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 and I just stop. Because I'm part of the problem then when I'm just blah, blah, blahing. Y'all let me know when I need to stop blah, blah, blahing, right? But we all do it. And so at some point, like, what are we co-creating? And what Eddie said, right? I'm thinking about what he said about this killing and what do we do? Like, what's that knowledge? What are we going to do with that knowledge? What are you going to do with it? Because that's a knowledge that was just created. That's a story that was just told. So how are you going to learn from that? What do you understand from that? Now, as an academic, one might take it home and then in the class trying to figure out how to put it into a concept that already exists. And so you can bring it into the theme of the course, right? On the ground, as we're doing this work, like he's inviting us into, is what are we going to do with it? Like, what has that produced? Like, let's get out of the, labels. Knowledge production is even itself a label that gets us stuck in that, what that means. But take it apart. What is knowledge? to know something. Production, to produce what? What was the cause of it? Why do you want to know something? What do you want to produce from knowing that thing? Is it just to know the thing and collect all this information? Knowledge is power, whatever. Or is it to know something, to use it to make something change, something beautiful in the world? And so this whole, just take the words apart, take it apart, because that's what the academy has really done. It has made words and things stagnant. That's the dehumanizing of it, actually, because humans change. Everything is impermanent. But what the academy does is trying to make things permanent, fixtures. And then that's where inhumanity comes about. Because there is nothing that's permanent and everything changes. And so once we get stuck on these concepts and we use these concepts in our lives to guide what we do and say and how we are as human beings and what we do, we're done. Basically, we're done. We're stuck. We're like robots. We're just like robots. Because I'm going to do it like this because I learned it like that. That was in a textbook and that doctor said that. They'll take it all apart. What'd your mama and your grandma say? And your auntie? Because they're, after 14 years of education, they're the ones that I recall in my everyday struggles. None of that book knowledge comes to mind. What is up with that, y'all? Right? That's real. Right, Mom? That's real.
I always feel like Eddie talking to me, even if he say he not talking to me. And so I've been sitting with this get down here thing for like I've been listening very intently, but also like how do we do all that and get down there to the same point? This question about institution, not like knowledge production outside of it. It's a very funny question. It's basically like all the non-white stuff, or like all the non-sanctioned work. Because when I think about it, there's a way that white supremacy show up that say that everything got fit into these categories in the way that it's been structured. And quite frankly, all the stuff that I've seen in community that is like institution building falls outside of those frameworks. And so like the question in and of itself is really like, what ain't white institutions supporting? That's the answer. Like it feel like that, but like I'm saying that because that's really the answer for me. The second way, and I'm gonna pause. The second thing that comes to mind is kind of along the lines of what Eric was talking about. I think that there is the mainstream and then there's the non-mainstream. And I think I just keep thinking about a conversation I had a year ago where basically, this is when my grandmother telling me to come get my kids. Yeah. I'm gonna get that in a second. But basically, I was having this conversation, and during the conversation, we were talking about what Black academics made it into the mainstream and what didn't. Full disclosure, I went to Morgan, so HBCU person, right? But even at the HBCU, it wasn't until I left that institution and started being in community and with folks that were Black elders that I found the academics, whether they say doctor or not in front of their name, that actually had a lot of the information I was looking for. And it wasn't something that had to be rebuilt. I didn't need a PAR project or a budget behind it. I just needed to talk to a Black elder. And that was like very, very real for me. And what it brought up was in the conversation, I realized I had a set of professors do a lot of introduction to Cornell West as a philosophical space to come from in terms of like how social issues were examined and like having a Black author. And then later on in my life, I'm being introduced to folks like Dr. Henry Clark. I'm getting introduced to folks like Dr. Greg Carr. I'm getting introduced to all of these other folks who I had never heard of before. And I'm like, why is it that I ain't never heard of them before? And what it really is that usually methodologies that rise to the level of the mainstream so that institutions and people at mass see it is some non-self-deterministic shit. Right, like, so if you think about, like, I have a critique of Cornell West and a lot of that work where it's like, in reality, Black people's self-actualization is what's going to create the ability for Black people's liberation. And a lot of his, to Eric's point, the liberalism stuff is like, we need to, like, all just get along. And the thing is, that circumvents the damn problem. There's some institutional shit here where we can't. And the only way to do that is to create systems that create level playing fields, and that's power building, that's institution building, and other folks ain't going to do that for us. So to everyone's point earlier, either hand over the resources and the keys and get the hell out of the way, or get bold the fuck over, because we powerful and we not going to actually stop.
It's been really great to hear everybody reflect. There's so many things to say about this question. I also think about the unlearning that needs to happen, and that shit goes really deep. Whether we've been like traumatized by these institutions, and just kind of like, what are we building then? Like, is institution the thing we want to build? Is it a different formation or organism that we want to build to create space for, transforming hearts and minds and raising consciousness and building collective consciousness? So I think a lot about the unlearning, and then like, what are those other formations that create space for learning, that are not just alternatives, but something else altogether that's not always kind of in reference to kind of these white colonial institutions? Is there something else, and what can that be? And I feel like for me, answering that question of like, so then what is this other thing that we're building, has to do a lot with like relationships. It has to do with the everyday. It has to do with like embodiedness, being in our bodies. I think for me as an organizer, like every conversation I'm having, like thinking about that as a space of learning for myself and the other person, and really creating a space of like humility, and like listening, and just kind of like an acknowledgement of how, like what shows up in those spaces of learning. So like the trauma, a lot of our work, I said that there's two things that our work revolves around, and it's like this community control of land and housing, but also kind of healing. And so thinking about healing as a learning practice, that's an everyday embodied practice, thinking about how do we create and cultivate relationships of healing and learning. Two moments come to mind when I think about these other moments, these everyday moments of like learning. I think about, I gifted a book to someone that we're building with and recently became a member of Village 11 Resistance. We had a membership orientation last week. And it was a book by Ron Casanova, Each One Teach One. He was an organizer with the National Union of the Homeless. Buy that book, because I think it speaks to just like poor people's organizing, what it means to be like Black in the diaspora, is Puerto Rican, organizing in New York City as a homeless person. I also think about a gift that I gave someone of an Audre Lorde poster that didn't really feel like it needed to be with me anymore. It needed to be with someone else. And I feel like that was a moment of learning that's outside of kind of like these traditional, like this person's imparting knowledge on me or whatever, these very like one-way encounters of knowledge production. I think about weekly conversations I have with my accountability partner person in Volar, and just kind of reflecting on my experience and how I'm growing as an individual. So I just think about like how these everyday quotidian kind of like experiences of consciousness raising. And so thinking about kind of all of these moments as opportunities for building consciousness and self-development, collective development, and unlearning as well. And, thinking about that as a relational process and not one that's just kind of me and myself, me and this book, this thing that I have to write on a test, but something that's living, ongoing, process-oriented, done in community, about accountability. There's so many things to say about like how knowledge production happens outside of the colonial institutions that we've been taught that are the arbiters of knowledge and the keepers of knowledge. And so I think just really being able to upset that and rethink that and hopefully dismantle it, because all these institutionals are super colonial and essentially just uphold racial capitalism and all kinds of other systems of power and violence. So, yeah.
I'm sorry, I just forgot the question. Okay, knowledge outside of institutions. I think that okay, let me just break this down in a little bit of, when you apply for a job, right? And you see an application, sometimes it says like how much years you did in college, right? And then sometimes they say you can actually skip that part if you have a certain amount of experience, right? It'd be like if you have 7 years of experiences in this particular field or whatever, right? I feel like in actual life, we just like miss that part. So it's like there is actual experiences that's happening that is knowledge, and people just miss that. And so when it comes to experiences in the community, it's actually, I think the first knowledge is being able to say that that is knowledge. That is knowledge. What happens in your community and recognizing that it is affecting you, your surroundings, your neighbors, your kids, that is the first knowledge, right? And then it's what you do with that knowledge next. It's like, okay, how do I relate these things? Why is it happening like this? Like in our community, we've seen a lot of asthma, upper respiratory illnesses and things like that, and even cancer. And so it was like, why is this happening? Once we all get that knowledge, then we put together that it was a lot of polluting industries in the community. And it was like, oh, that's why. And so then it was like, okay, now what do you do with that experience? What do you do with that knowledge, right? And how do you use that knowledge to build something that's truly for you guys, right? And that is when you create a vision. And then that vision becomes that knowledge. In that vision, it is what you want to see. What do you want to build with your community, spaces that you want that's not offered right now, right? And so I think that when it comes to knowledge, we really have to use storytelling and how that is affecting our communities first. And then I think that there is also, I think somebody was talking about it, elders that live in the community that you can talk to that has a lot of wisdom. They can tell you what the community used to look like, how you used to have trees that you don't see no more, like apple trees or pear trees, how they used to pick from them, and you don't see it anymore. And it's not normal anymore, right? How they used to actually cook their food and they didn't get all the processed foods in the stores and they used to grow their food, and that was the normal. That is knowledge, and that's the type of knowledge that I want to use to envision what our community can really look like. It is not the knowledge you gain in institutions that tells you, like do some research, do a survey. It is the knowledge that actually can feed our communities, that can actually help our communities not, be disposed of. Because we have seen communities actually, they don't exist anymore. And they were communities of color. I've seen communities that were polluted out. There was a community called Fairfield, and that community was polluted out, right? And they say history is knowledge. So in that history, we saw if we don't do something now, we will be that community. And we're not far from it, we're like a mile from it, right? And so we use that knowledge to say, we can't let this happen again. And so I think that those are the best types of knowledge that can actually prevent history from repeating itself. And then I think, there might be some other knowledge, like when we are building our homes for the community that we don't know, like there's a lot of architectural stuff I don't know. So I might need knowledge from somebody else. But, and that is knowledge that we then invite into the community to help us build that vision. And so I think that's the knowledge on the outside, is actually talking with youth. I do that. That's my favorite thing to do, because like they just say the unimaginable. And I'm like, I didn't even think of that. And they haven't been corrupted yet. So they are free thinkers. And I get to work with them every day. I get to see them light up when they give an idea that they see come to life, right? I get to see them light up when they think about what type of businesses they can create to actually reuse material. And they light up about that. And that's because we give them a chance to use whatever skills they actually already have, whether it's art, whether it's music, whatever it is. That's their knowledge. That's what they know. And I think so when we think about knowledge, let's not think about knowledge in one way, because knowledge is a lot of things. It's art and it's around us all the time. And so I think that's how knowledge could be, is not missing it. Don't miss the knowledge that's in front of you.
So I'm not going to say much because I think I said a lot already to answer this question. But I was thinking about so recently I've been learning a lot about disability justice and ableism, and it's been something that has completely reframed how I understand myself in this world, how I understand my work, communication, and all of that. Chief Swakoko, so I was born in a part of Liberia called Swakoko, which is a territory that is mainly occupied by Pele people, which is an ethnic group in Liberia. And Swakoko is named after a chief. Her name is Chief Swakoko, and she is known as one of the only women chief who was able to hold her territory for as long as she did and fight back against the government at the time, Liberian government, which was filled with Americo-Liberians, mainly from Maryland, who were taking over. And she celebrated as one of the chiefs who were able to hold on to her territory for a long time, and was known as one of the only women chief in Liberia who even held that level of power. And I was reading this journal entry. Some researchers, I think they were from Harvard, had came to Liberia in her area to study who is this person that has held this amount of territory and has this much power and control, to the point where even after she had given her territory away to the government, she still had so much power and control in that area. And so they come into the village and they're meeting people and they're just like, take me to Chief Swakoko, where is she? And they come upon where she stays and they describe, which is another thing of anthropology, the description of people. They're like, there's this old blind lady who is just laying here, and they're looking like, where is the chief? And I bring that up because when we think about knowledge production, I want to think about who we consider to be knowledge producers. We think about the ableist terminology that we all say, the blind leading the blind, and the concept, right, that the ability to produce knowledge means that there's certain level of abilities, right, and able-bodied people are the only people that can do so. And so when I'm thinking about knowledge production, I wanted to take it a step further outside of just the confines of institutions, but really have us begin to pick our minds about who we consider to be trusted people of knowledge, right? Because we may have so many people in our lives who are knowledgeable, but because of certain anti-Black notions that we hold, we don't see them as trusted knowledge producers, right? And so I'm thinking about the ableism in that, and the ableism in seeing this blind woman and believing, to the point where they even said, oh, it looks like her grandchild is the one who is running this because she is blind and cannot somehow run her village. That's the first thing. The next question I have is, can we trust the knowledge that is produced out of institutions? As someone who did go to undergrad at a predominantly white institution, Towson University, a piece of shit. I'm gonna keep saying I'm not paying that money back. Fuck y'all. But anyway, so I'm paying it now because I'm trying to go somewhere in life. But like Nikki, I'm hoping she can topple it over soon so I could just move on from my life. But anyway, what I'm thinking about for real, like, why do I gotta pay y'all back? Like clearly y'all are slave owners, and clearly it was enslaved people that built this shit. And you telling me that I have to come to this institution, get this white supremacist education, and then pay y'all niggas? Like, get the fuck. But anyway, I say that all to say, it's like, can we actually trust the knowledge that is produced in institutions? As somebody who went to an undergrad, I can tell you that I spent a lot of time understanding that I had to completely pick apart the knowledge that I gained at my PWI. It was not knowledge, right? And a lot of it, I had to go back into communities, right, in order for me to completely reflect and break that shit down and say, a lot of this shit has no use for me, right? Because knowledge productions in an institution is just that, it is a production. right? And it is a production that is given and for white supremacy. Ain't nothing produced in a fucking institution. Ain't no college professor. I love Nikki as much as I do, and ain't no college professor producing knowledge in a university that is toppling that university, because you got to get paid by the university. You got to get your health insurance from that university. You got to get tenured by that university. You have to get your papers approved by that university, and you probably need them to write you a letter of recommendation. So you ain't toppling shit, okay? And if you are, you're probably doing it on the side at the expense of the Black students. So you meet with them in secret, and then you go back into your office and you go type your little papers and you get your promotions. And so that question again, what is the knowledge that is being produced in institutions? Who is that knowledge for? And if truly knowledge production was being done in institutions, why are they existing? So it's like, that's part of what Eddie Conway was talking about. We sit and we have these conversations, and all of these professors and anthropology and sociology and doctorate people come into the room and they're like, yeah, fight the power. And I'm like, why is your institution still standing? You've been there for 10 years. Why is it still there? Because clearly you're not invested in toppling it. The only knowledge production that you're doing is to keep it floating, right? And so your university get all of the credit for all of the great things that you do, and it continues to stand. What does that look like, right? We're not seeing mass protests of professors. We're seeing mass protests of students, and predominantly Black students who are literally putting everything on the line to do so, while professors are only worried about if they're going to get tenured or not. Like, let's keep it a buck about that, right? What is the knowledge that you're producing, right? And so that is kind of my thing of like, what is happening in those buildings? Now, once again, I say all that to say, I always bring it back. This concept of knowledge production within academia, it is not new. Black people have been producing knowledge and intellect for a long time. And so when I have this conversation, I do not want to start with these universities, because there are other Black thinkers that have always done this shit, right? And has created and built those things. To close it out, I think about Liberian women. The other day I was on Twitter and someone had tweeted, there's this new app that does this thing where you and your friends come and you put money, and then every month somebody get the money. That's called fucking susu. I was like, the fuck is wrong with y'all? In Liberia, I mean, in other African countries, you have what you call susu. And the susu specifically in Liberia came out of the Civil War. So after the Civil War, Liberian women realized that they had lack of access in economic, right? The entire infrastructure of the country had fell, and Liberian women were at the most vulnerable because of that. And so what they began to do is they created the groups of themselves where they would collect money. So let's say this month we're collecting $100. All 7 of us collect $100. We decide that Nikki will be the one this month to get the $100. Next day she gets one. Next day they get one, right? And so what happens is they're finding a way to build economic power amongst the group of them in a way that has nothing to do with the government. That is knowledge production, right? And now you have a bunch of people talking about apps. Like, fuck out of here. Because at the end of the day, that kind of knowledge production requires a foundation in some kind of value outside of capitalism, right? Capitalism does not allow you to trust that 7 people can collect $2,000 and only one person will get that $2,000, but trusting that next month is going to be your turn, and that you will give all of that money knowing that even though you're walking away this month with $0, it will be your turn next month. That is part of knowledge production, right? And so, yeah, that's my thing. Like, ask yourself that question. How much knowledge are you producing in your institution? Because it's still standing.
Okay, we have run out of time, but we have about 10 minutes or 15 minutes, John said. If there's any questions from the audience.
Yeah, who did? Could you explain? I guess it's a question. Oh, you who asked you?
So I swear to God, I was ready to say that. Google that shit, bro. I ain't even trying to be disrespectful. You know the name. You know the context of the conversation. If you are genuine about doing this work, I cannot hand it to you.
Well, next question. Okay.
Any other questions?
Any questions? Anyone wanna engage.
Yeah, that's the part. That's the part. Let's use the time.
Yeah, right there. Yeah.
So that everybody heard, the question is, as a student in a university who is also trying to get a degree, how do you grapple with the issues that is existing in the university?
What kind of student? I guess I asked that just because I think that different students have different orientations and positionalities in relationship to the university that we can't assume. And so that's why I'm just going to ask us to unpack that a little bit, right? If you're a first generation student, that looks different. Not you, but I'm just saying like this hypothetical student. So that's, you're just saying students in general.
I guess I can just add to like, I'm working now with 1,000 students and with some John Hopkins students. And we, it's on the basis of what the community want. And then it's also on the basis of like holding their institutions accountable to the harms they have caused to communities. I'm not saying like this is great, but I mean, it is something that they are doing and challenging that system and not letting it, just feel as though it can just go business as usual. They are challenging it within the institution, which, that actually has to happen because when you are the ones paying for it, they're willing to listen to you. Me on the outside, they ain't gonna listen to me. I mean, I can make them a little while, but when you're in on it, you can also you can start challenging certain contracts they have, right? If they're contracting with something that's harmful to communities, you can say, hey, if you don't stop doing this, as students, we will do whatever, blah, blah, blah. Whether that's like putting yourself as a student on the line, whether that's like challenging them and like exposing what they're actually doing and how it's harmful to communities in relation to like, just even like they're like zero waste is what we talk about. So like with the harms of the incinerator that's burning in a community, you can challenge your institution to say, do not contract with this institution. Make sure our waste does not end up here, right? And that can stop contracts from going there into building communities like a compost facility led by a community. And then that goes directly into that. And that is the work that we are working on to make sure that, we can turn all these different harms into benefits for our community by the community.
I want to add, and I want to thank you for being brave enough to ask the question, because everybody in this room, if you've really been listening to us, you should be asking that same question of yourself. Maybe some of you are already doing the work, but what he just asked, any of you in the institution, and I mean everybody, I don't mean students only, you should be asking the question, what am I doing here to make change? That was my first comment. The other thing is, as a person within an institution, especially a student, you actually have the most power. You have more power than faculty because you're bringing money and you're actually paying a tuition, right? Like the sister said, right? So they need your money. And this is the time you have the most power to change an institution. And what are you going to do with the power? You recognize your power and you figure out, just like was said, right? Contracts, what are they doing? You need to have a meeting with the president. Why is that? Little old me. How come I get an audience with the president? Well, because you bring money in and they like your money, right? So don't underestimate the power that you have while you're a student in any institution. That is actually the time you have the most power to change what's happening there and to dismantle stuff. Don't underestimate that power.
So I'm going to give a direct thing that folks can do. If anybody in here is a student or work within an institution that is under the University System of Maryland, if you're looking at this from an abolitionist perspective, everybody that exists here who have worked down to high schools and elementary schools, you're sitting on prison labor. Every appliance, every furniture that you see within university systems of Maryland were made in state and federal prisons. You can flip over your local toaster at your university or the chair you're sitting on, and you will see what prison that came out of. The state of Maryland entered into a contract. MCE, Maryland Correctional Enterprise, was created as a way to bring more money into the state, and that money comes at the hand of state and prison labor. And so one of the things we started at Towson University, which if your university functions under the university system of Maryland, you can do something about this. Forget your president. You go to the Board of Regents. Those are the big dogs. A lot of people in here who are in institutions, yes, the president, but presidents are really just there in terms of face. It is the Board of Regents that is carrying and moving that university. The Board of Regents is the boss of your president. They hold the power. You think about where your chancellor goes and how much the chancellor for university make, and the fact that his property is on a plantation. Let's talk about that later. And so what you can do is advocate for your university to move out of that contract, right? We were attempting to do that at Towson. The issue is, and I think it is very so much intentional, is that in the state of Maryland, the Board of Regents has to make a decision like that because every university under that system has to be on the same accord and is connected. And so although we at Towson University were calling for Towson to completely cut out that contract, we could not do it alone because College Park, Hopkins, Goucher, University of Maryland, all of the universities have also for the same thing, right? And so if you're in here today and you're saying, what can I do today? You can begin to do the work, the call for university to pull it out of that contract, because there is no reason why you should be going to a university and sitting in a chair that is funded by not only prison labor, but at the hands of anti-Blackness, right? And so oftentimes we're like, oh, all of these abstract things, what can we do? That's one thing you can do. The second thing you can do is thinking about, when you think about professors, is the tenureship process. That is a huge thing that a lot of students don't understand why, especially Black students, we should be a part of that tenureship process, because a tenured professor can be a very dangerous professor. And at the same time, tenureship and the way it looks for a lot of Black professors is completely inequitable, starting with the fact that you have to publish work in 5-star journals and so forth. And a lot of those journals do not want to see work around Blackness, right? And so part of what we were organizing around Towson is for students to be a part of that tenureship process, because if you look at most tenureship boards, ain't nothing but white people there, okay? And so those are two things that you can think about advocating for within your university, things that we were working directly for at Towson University.
Okay.
Let's not forget Baba.
Okay, I'm getting this sign.
Let's not forget Baba.
Right. Eddie, do you want to type? But I think we do have to wrap things up. And if folks want to informally chat, I mean, I think there will be time for that.
You have a comment. Okay, I was getting a lot of static. Okay, I do have a comment. I think popular education, the kind that was practiced in Brazil, where people came together in their communities from all walks of life, they sat around and they talked about issues that affected the community and engaged young people as well as old people in coming up with a solution. I think that's probably a framework that we could probably start using in our community. It's always directed towards something. And in this particular case, I think in Baltimore, we have been talking about the horrible anchor university of Johns Hopkins and for centuries how it has been abusing and violating our communities, destroying our communities. They're sitting on $9 billion. Why not make that a campaign? Why not make them give $1 billion to the community? Why not shut the university down if they don't? The university is only popular and famous because it's done employed and engaged an auxiliary police force. It's supplementing, and it's trying to arm them now to continue to oppress the community. Why not shut them down? If they can't donate $1 billion to rectify the harm they've done to our communities over the years, the decades, the centuries, why not shut them down? Academics, organizers, people from the community, don't let them continue to operate like this. In 10 years from now, be talking about how horrible they are. You know, use popular education, go into communities, talk to the community, talk to the organizers, talk to the academics, organize and shut them down, or have them turn over $1 billion so you can start repairing some of the damage they've done. You know, it's not rocket science. They did it in the civil rights era. You will not get anything as long as you're sitting on your hands and talking about it. You got to get out there. You got to put your bodies on the line, and you got to organize the people, and you can't go out there by yourself. You got to take the community with you. And the only way they're going to go with you is to understand what the issues is and how to resolve them. And that's through popular education. You just got to do it.
Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Thanks to this fabulous panel.